Hey everyone, today I want to talk about aspec representation. As someone who identifies as aro-ace, but I didn't figure it out until well into my adulthood, I still wonder if I would have been able to figure it out sooner if asexuality and aromanticism were more present. But it's not just about having more aspec characters. It's also about how we're represented and the diversity within the aspec community that's often overlooked. A lot of the time when we talk about our representation, we focus on increasing the number of aspec characters. And don't get me wrong, we absolutely need more of them. But I want to stress that it's not just about the numbers. The quality of representation is equally important. Too often, the aspec characters that we do get are one-dimensional, stereotyped, or simply there to check a box. They lack depth, complexity, or worse, they just exist to be erased or to have their identities invalidated. We need aspec characters who feel real and who reflect the diversity of aspec experiences. That means breaking away from the idea that all asexual and aromantic people fit into one mold. Another important point is that aspec identities are often assumed to be white identities. This is a harmful stereotype that completely ignores the diversity within the aspec community. It doesn't help that even in social media, the aspec community is often dominated by white voices. People of all races, ethnicities, and cultural backgrounds can be asexual or aromantic. But in the handful of aspec characters that are actually out there, media doesn't always reflect that, since most of those characters are also often white. Representation needs to be intersectional. We need aspec characters of color, whose identity intersects with their race, their culture, and their experiences. These intersections are important, because being aspec can mean many different things to many different people based on their cultural context. And that diversity of experiences is something that media should be representing and reflecting. The ace and aro spectrums are broad and diverse, but you wouldn't know it from looking at mainstream media. When we do see aspec representation, it's often presented in very binary terms. You're either fully asexual and experience no sexual attraction, or you're not asexual at all. But there are so many identities in between. I want to see ace characters who sometimes do experience sexual attraction, like demisexual or gray sexual characters. I want to see them using labels explicitly, so audiences get a clear understanding of the spectrum. We need media to show that demisexual or gray sexual identities are just as valid as any other ace identity. The same goes for aromantic characters. I want to see more aromantic characters who sometimes experience romantic attraction, because being aromantic doesn't mean never experiencing romance. It doesn't mean that someone can't date or form a romantic relationship. And just like with ace identities, the occasional or circumstantial romantic attraction that aromantic characters might experience doesn't invalidate their aromantic identity. Another area where I think media could really improve is representing queer platonic partnerships, or QPRs. Queer platonic relationships are partnerships that go beyond friendship, but don't fit into the typical framework of romantic or sexual relationships either. These relationships are often overlooked or erased in favor of traditional romantic narratives. But it's time we start seeing them on screen more. We've certainly had friendships in the media that at least I could have considered a QPR or looked at as a QPR, but one big problem is they've often been the punchline of queerphobic jokes. As an aro-ace guy growing up, I sought out male characters who felt about their friends the way that I do about mine to identify with. Two pairings that come to mind for me are Corey and Sean from Boy Meets World and JD and Turk from Scrubs. In both cases, whenever their friendships were really portrayed as deeply invested partnerships, they'd be mocked by the rest of the characters for it, and even shamed for it sometimes. They genuinely cared about each other, and that caring was something that I identified with. But in cases like that, they really had the potential to help people feel seen, but they used them for a cheap laugh. I want to see media that shows the many forms that love can take, and I want it to be taken seriously. We already see romantic and sexual love on screen all the time, but love can also be platonic, it can also be queer platonic, or it can be something else entirely. We need stories that explore all those forms of connection and show that they are just as valuable and meaningful as romantic or sexual relationships. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the Aspec representation that we have seen so far. We've had some great moments, like Todd Chavez from BoJack Horseman, who is openly asexual. He was one of the first explicitly ace characters in mainstream media, and that is huge. In a lot of ways, his character helped lay the groundwork. But while Todd's journey is significant, we can always strive for more nuanced and varied portrayals. Then you've got Heartbreak High, especially season 2, where Cash, who is asexual, tries to figure out his relationship with Darren. It's great to see an ace character on screen in a romantic relationship, but especially in season 2, the dynamic that they set up feels a little unbalanced. The show tends to focus more on Darren's frustration with the lack of physical intimacy, and they even think about joining a celibacy group just to make it work with Cash. While I get that relationships are about compromise, it kind of makes Cash's asexuality seem more like a problem that Darren has to fix, rather than something that both of them can navigate together. Cash's feelings seem to get a little bit lost in the storyline. Another example is Jughead in Riverdale, who is canonically portrayed as Ace in the comics, but not in the show. Something that disappointed a lot of fans who were hoping to see that part of his character. This shows how Ace and Arrow identities are sometimes erased or ignored in favor of making characters more relatable in a conventional sense. So in the end, it's not just about seeing more Aspec representation. It's not about gaining more characters. It's about making sure they're represented in ways that reflect the full diversity of the aromantic and asexual spectrums. I want to see Ace and Arrow characters of color. I want to see Demi, Gray, Cupio, Ego, Lithro, and other Arrow and Ace microlabels used in mainstream media. I want to see queer platonic partnerships on screen that aren't just used for a cheap laugh, and characters who challenge the narrow definitions of love and attraction that we're so used to seeing. The more diverse our representation is, the more people will feel seen. The more we'll break away from the harmful stereotypes surrounding Aspec identities. And the more the chances that someone out there who's looking for their own answers just might find them. Let's push for stories that reflect the beauty and complexity of our community. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What kind of Aspec representation do you want to see more of? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you found this video helpful. Thank you for the support, and I'll see you in the next video.